Hey everyone, imagine this. A simple clown costume turning into your worst nightmare. Sounds crazy, right? That's exactly what happens in Clown 2014. This movie takes something fun and turns it into pure terror. Before we dive in, here's something you might not know. Only 0.6% of you watching are subscribed. If you're enjoying the content, now's the best time to hit that subscribe button. And here's why. If you're a Potterhead or just love magical stories, I'm about to dive into all the Harry Potter movies, explaining every magical moment, every hidden detail, and all the adventures. Trust me, you don't want to miss out. So don't wait. Hit subscribe, grab your popcorn, dim the lights, and let's jump into the terrifying world of Clown. The story begins with a boy named Jack celebrating his birthday. His mother, Meg, decides to throw a clown-themed party because, despite being young, Jack loves comedians. To make the party entertaining, Meg hires a professional clown. However, the clown doesn't show up and calls after the festivities have already started to inform her that he won't be able to attend. In a pinch, Meg calls her husband, Kent, who works as a real estate agent and is fixing up one of their properties. When Kent learns the clown isn't coming, he begins searching for a costume that fits him. He stumbles upon a trunk containing a full clown costume, which he decides to wear to make his son's party memorable. After the party ends, Kent takes his son to his room and then relaxes on the couch to talk to Meg. An excited Meg tells Kent to take off the costume, hinting that she has a big surprise for him. But before she can reveal it, Kent falls asleep on the couch. The next morning, Meg wakes Kent, urging him to take Jack to school as they are already running late. She also asks him to change into a fresh outfit since she has a meeting to attend. Kent tries to explain, but with no time to waste, he agrees to take Jack. After finishing his coffee, Kent heads to the bathroom to wash his face. Despite scrubbing hard, the makeup refuses to come off. Without further delay, Kent takes Jack to school and then decides to visit one of his properties. Upon arriving, Kent, still dressed as a clown, interacts with workers removing carpets. Initially, they don't recognize him until he introduces himself. He then goes to the bathroom to try removing the makeup again, but it remains stubbornly intact. Frustrated, he attempts to remove the wig and nose but finds they won't budge either. Determined, Kent tries taking off the costume itself, but, despite using all his strength, fails to remove it. Growing desperate, he grabs a blade from a drawer and tries to cut through the costume. However, he only succeeds in inflicting a severe wound on his wrist. After bandaging himself, he joins the workers, takes a small saw, and tries cutting the costume with it. Unfortunately, the saw breaks, leaving Kent defeated. Kent returns home still wearing the clown costume. Seeing him like this, Meg questions why he hasn't taken it off. Kent explains everything he went through while trying to remove it, but Meg doesn't believe him. She grabs some medical tools and tries pulling off the red clown nose, only to accidentally tear off a piece of flesh along with it. As Kent screams in pain, their dog grabs and eats the clown nose. Realizing the wig has fused with Kent's real hair, Meg becomes worried. Hearing the commotion, Jack enters the bathroom, prompting Meg to leave Kent to care for their son. Meanwhile, Kent heads to the hospital, where doctors bandage him up. However, upon returning home, he feels an intense hunger. Despite eating cake and other foods, his stomach continues to growl. The next morning, Meg wakes up to find the kitchen in complete disarray, and a note from Kent saying he's gone to investigate the property where he found the costume. Kent calls his secretary to check the records of the house's ownership. While speaking to her, he recalls that the costume trunk was chained shut. Realizing he needs answers, Kent decides to check the paperwork himself. At the office, Kent retrieves a file and sits in the cafeteria to read. He discovers that the previous owner, Martin Carlson, had passed away. While pondering his next steps, Kent notices a child staring at him. Strangely, his stomach growls even louder, despite him having recently eaten a lot. Feeling increasingly uneasy, Kent visits a Halloween costume shop, where he gets the contact information for a man with the surname Martin. After some time, Kent calls the number because he wants to talk about the costume. For some reason, the man on the other end is terrified and begs Kent not to touch the costume. Shocked, Kent reveals that he has already worn it. The man quickly gives him his address and asks him to come over. After driving for a while, the real estate agent arrives at the location and meets Bert Carlson, the brother of the house's previous owner. Bert introduces himself, offers Kent a cup of tea, and begins to explain the origin of the costume. He reveals that he and his brother created it for a failed clown. Intrigued, Kent asks how to remove the costume, and Bert tells him a little about the origin of clowns. He explains that clowns were originally creatures with white skin and red noses, living in icy mountains to feed themselves. These clowns would lure 5 children into their caves and eat one each month during the winter. Over time, this story was forgotten, and clowns became something children mostly enjoy. Suddenly, Kent starts feeling dizzy and asks why Bert is telling him all this. Before Bert can answer, Kent passes out. When Kent regains consciousness, the costume maker informs him that the tea should have kept him asleep for a while. Bert then tells him that the only way to stop the monster is to cut off its limbs. Hearing this, Kent grows desperate and manages to free himself from his restraints at the last moment. In the struggle, Bert's blade strikes Kent's shoulder. Furious, the real estate agent pulls the blade from his shoulder and throws it back at Bert. Kent grabs control of the situation, disarming Bert by taking his revolver. He then demands to know what Bert was trying to do. Bert explains that the costume is not just fabric. It is the skin of the monster.
It's not a costume, it's skin of a demon.
Not fully understanding what this means, Kent leaves and returns home. He begins telling Meg everything that happened, urging her to call the police while showing her the blade wound on his shoulder. Kent, now desperate, also explains that Bert thinks he is a monster and pleads with Meg not to tell anyone, fearing people will think he's crazy. Unbeknownst to him, Meg's family overhears everything while sitting on the sofa. They don't believe him. Meg's father confronts Kent, asking what his problem is, and orders him to leave his daughter alone if he can't prove his claims. To prove he's telling the truth, Kent decides to show them the wound on his shoulder and takes them outside to see Bert, whom he had locked in his car. The family believes Kent has kidnapped an innocent man and thinks it's all a joke. When Meg's brother tries to pull off Kent's clown wig, Kent snaps his arm, horrifying Meg and their son, who watch through a window. To avoid scaring them further, Kent decides to leave. He takes Bert and heads to the police station. However, midway there, Kent begins to transform. His hands and feet elongate unnaturally. Realizing what is happening, Bert leaps forward and tightens a pair of handcuffs around Kent's neck, causing him to lose control of the car and crash into a wall. After the crash, the real estate agent emerges unscathed from the vehicle. He pulls Bert out and demands to know why he attacked him despite being injured. Bert weakly tells Kent that he must end his own life before it's too late, then passes out. Suddenly, Kent notices 2 children in a car that had stopped to help. Seeing them, his stomach growls loudly, and he experiences a strange hallucination. Panicking, Kent runs into the woods. He eventually stumbles upon a nearby campsite, where a boy is carrying some dishes to wash. Hearing the boy approach, Kent's stomach growls again. The boy sees Kent and asks if he needs something to eat. Without hesitation, the boy, a scout, pulls out a cookie from his pocket to offer it. But as he gets closer, Kent grabs the boy's arm and bites off his fingers in one swift motion. The next morning, Meg visits Jack's school principal and asks them to prevent Kent from picking Jack up. After bidding goodbye to her son, Meg leaves, but Colton and other students see Meg kissing Jack, and the boy becomes a target for bullies for the first time. Meanwhile, Kent discovers that his original teeth are falling out and decides to end his own life. He goes to hide in one of the houses he manages. As he opens the door, Kent is greeted by a boy who begins talking to him, causing Kent's stomach to growl loudly. Although he was extremely hungry, Kent tells the boy to stay away and locks himself inside the house, sitting by the door to resist the temptation. At home, Meg tries to control the dog, which has gone mad after eating Kent's nose. Suddenly, she receives a call from her husband, who apologizes for everything happening. In the end, Kent tells her this is the only way and ends the call, leaving Meg even more worried. After hanging up, Kent attempts to use a revolver to end his life, firing twice without hesitation. However, moments later, he wakes up unharmed, as though nothing had happened. Realizing his first plan won't work, the real estate agent goes to a hardware store. He buys saws and other tools, then heads to one of the properties. Meanwhile, Meg decides to follow her husband and searches different properties. trying to figure out where he might be. At one house, Kent sets up a contraption in the garage. He places two saws opposite each other, sits in a chair, and leans forward, trying to let the blades cut him. But nothing happens. As he sits there, trying to work up his courage, Kent loses his balance and falls to the side, unharmed. He gets up and walks away. Just then, the boy who had seen Kent earlier comes into the house to check if Kent is okay. The boy steps on a piece of broken metal, falls, and dies. At first, Kent feels terrible, but soon his hunger takes over and he eats his first horrifying meal. Meg, not knowing what her husband has done, arrives at the house and starts opening the door. Kent shouts at her to stop. Meg tries to calm him down, telling him she's come to take him home. When Kent doesn't respond, Meg tells him she needs him and reveals that she's pregnant. She says this was the news she wanted to share the day he put on the costume. Hearing this, Kent opens the door and tells Meg to take him away. In the basement, only the boy's bones remain. Kent explains to Meg that he's changing and begs her to chain him up. He tells her not to let him out, no matter what. After tying him up, Meg tries to understand what's happening by reading Bert's book. She finds a section called The Carlson Brothers and sees a picture of Bert wearing the clown costume. She wonders how Bert managed to take it off. Meg goes to the hospital to see Bert and starts asking him questions. Since Bert can't talk, he writes in a notebook. He asks where Kent is and says he's the only one who can help. But Meg doesn't tell him Kent's location. Bert warns her not to trust Kent and refuses to give her any answers. Frustrated, Meg shows Bert the picture she found and asks how he got the costume. This agitates Bert. A nurse comes in and asks Meg to leave. Determined, Meg goes to the house where Kent found the suit. There, she discovers a camera pointed at a chair with handcuffs attached. She begins watching the recordings to learn more. Meanwhile, at school, Jack feels upset and cries, thinking about his dad. A boy named Colton teases him and insults his parents. Colton tries to smear glue on Jack's face, but Jack bites his hand and runs home. When Jack gets home, he looks for his mom, but doesn't find her. He starts searching around the house. Then he hears a noise from the basement. Furious, Jack goes downstairs and finds Kent chained up. Jack doesn't realize this is no longer his dad. He walks closer and starts talking about the bullies at school, explaining how Colton tried to smear glue on his face. Meanwhile, Meg goes home and starts watching the footage from the camera she found. In the recording, she sees someone wearing the clown costume running around. She decides to take the camera home but gets a call from her friend, who was supposed to pick Jack up from school. The friend says Jack wasn't at school, which confuses Meg. She rushes home and starts searching for her son. Eventually, she finds him safe in the living room. Feeling scared, she asks Jack why he left school and where his father is. At the same time, Kent arrives at Colton's house. Colton is playing a game and talking to his friends online. Suddenly, he notices someone behind him and warns his friends that there's an intruder. Grabbing a pair of nunchaku, he tries to defend himself. Colton asks Kent if Jack is with him. While still on the call, one of Colton's friends reveals that Colton had planned to smear glue on Jack and was planning to hurt him the next day. Hearing this, the clown jumps at Colton, attacking him savagely. Kent devours Colton and rips out his heart, throwing it onto the TV screen. Meanwhile, Meg starts packing to leave town with Jack. Suddenly, she notices their dog acting aggressively, just like Kent. The dog tries to attack her, but Bert appears and kills the dog. Seeing her pet die shocks Meg, and Bert tries to calm her down. He then asks her where Kent is. Meg says she doesn't know. Bert explains the truth about the suit. Bert tells her the suit came to his store by accident in a shipment from Iceland. Unlike anything else in the shipment, the suit was in perfect condition. Bert decided to use it as a clown costume to entertain children in hospitals. His brother Martin promised to find a cure for the curse, but after Bert wore the suit, he passed out and woke up days later, free from the curse and without the costume. Martin had taken 5 sick children from the hospital and sacrificed them to the demon, one for each winter month in Iceland. After Martin gave the demon what it wanted, the curse was lifted from Bert, allowing him to live a normal life. Bert spent years searching for a way to break the curse, while Martin kept the suit hidden. Meg insists her husband would never hurt anyone, let alone eat someone. Bert shows her the scout's severed fingers and says he cut them off to prevent Kent from eating him. Bert then asks where Kent might have gone. Jack blurts out that his dad went to Colton's house. Meg quickly drives Jack to Colton's house without explaining what's going on. When they arrive, they don't find Kent. Instead, they discover Colton's half-eaten body. Meg starts thinking about where Kent could be and remembers she has something that might help her find him. She decides to check a specific place. When they arrive, Meg tells Bert to wait in the car while she goes inside to bring her husband out. At the same time, a boy enters a tunnel, searching for his younger brother. The boy crawls through the space, determined to find his younger brother. He comes across a section covered in blood and handprints, but keeps going, refusing to give up. Soon he sees Kent, now a monstrous clown, trying to swallow his brother whole. Horrified, the boy distracts the clown, giving his younger brother a chance to escape. However, Kent turns his attention to the older boy and devours him instead. Blood flows down a nearby slide, catching the attention of other families and causing them to panic. People run in all directions, desperate to escape. Meanwhile, Meg keeps searching for her husband. Bert pulls her into the kitchen and points to bloodstains on the floor. He demands that Meg take him straight to Kent. Confused, Meg asks what's going on. Before Bert can answer, Kent, in his monstrous form, suddenly appears. Bert tries to decapitate him with an axe, but Kent becomes furious and attacks Bert. Meg pleads with Kent to stop, managing to calm him down. Kent tells Meg that he only needs to eat one more child, or Jack will become his final victim. Just then, the police arrive. Meg leaves the building as Bert is arrested, accused of being the main suspect in the killings. Meg calls her father, begging him to take Jack and leave town. Her father asks what's happening, but Meg hangs up when she notices a lost boy nearby. She approaches the boy, thinking she can use him to stop Kent. But before she can do anything, the boy's mother appears and hugs him. Feeling helpless, Meg heads back to her car and listens to the radio, trying to think of her next move. Suddenly, a young girl knocks on her window, asking for a ride. Meg sees an opportunity and agrees to take the girl. While the girl sleeps, Meg drives to a secluded area. When they arrive, Meg wakes the girl and tells her to get out of the car. Frightened, the girl starts banging on the window, trying to get back inside. A police officer appears, calming the girl and telling her to wait. Meg is shocked that Kent hasn't shown up and realizes he must have gone after Jack instead. Panicking, Meg drives back to town and tries calling her father, but he doesn't answer. She races to her father's house as fast as she can. When she arrives, she finds her father and begins explaining what's happening. Suddenly, Kent appears and, in one horrifying motion, rips her father's jaw apart, killing him instantly. Devastated, Meg runs to the garage, grabs a hammer, and prepares to fight. She signals Jack, who is coming down the stairs, to go back up and hide. Jack obeys, heading back upstairs. The clown attacks Meg and she strikes it in the face with the hammer. But the demon is too strong. It overpowers her, pins her foot under a car, and starts trying to pull the child out of her stomach. In desperation, Meg screams for Jack to run. Jack heads toward a locked door but can't open it in time. He hides under the stairs, trembling as the bloodthirsty demon searches for him. Meg grabs a knife and stabs the clown over and over, trying to stop him. She manages to cut the demon's neck, but it's not enough to kill him. The clown bites a chunk out of Meg's shoulder and throws her in front of a closet. Meg passes out, unable to stop the clown as he looks for Jack. The demon finds Jack hiding, but the space is too small for him to reach the boy. With no way out, the clown starts breaking the staircase from underneath, trying to grab Jack. Just in time, Meg wakes up and wraps a chain around the demon's neck. As the clown struggles to reach Jack, he almost tears his own head off, leaving him weak. Meg picks up the hammer, ready to finish him. Suddenly, Kent's voice comes through the demon, begging her for help. Hoping she can still save him, Meg tells Jack to bring the book and some extra chains. Jack refuses, saying it's not their father anymore. Realizing there's no other way, Meg turns back to face the demon. The clown attacks her, but Meg hits him hard with the hammer, cutting off his head. A massive amount of colorful blood spills everywhere. Relieved, Meg hugs Jack tightly and starts apologizing to him. Just then, the demon grabs Jack's leg. Meg, using all her strength, tears the last nerve, holding the clown's head to its body with her bare hands. The clown's body begins to dissolve, leaving only Kent's lifeless head and the cursed costume behind. After all the chaos, the police arrive and start an investigation. They collect all the evidence, including the suit. And with that, the terrifying story comes to an end. Thanks for watching. Always remember, Be careful with what you bring into your life, because sometimes the things that seem harmless can turn into your worst nightmare. Stay safe, stay smart, and I'll see you in the next one. Until then, keep the lights on.